Yeah, I'll just go ahead and start it.
The work session to order at 6:28. Any additions, deletions?
The only thing I would add is I forwarded or I responded to the email that came to the board, responded to all, if
Yes.
I think some discussion about, or at least give you my perspective on a school-wide cell phone ban and whether we should move forward and then have some dialogue. So probably, just a quick policy discussion.
Okay. First, I guess we won't have any community comments since we don't have any, well, I guess we have community out there. Okay. Hearing none. Superintendent evaluation.
Do we want to vote on the agenda?
What's that?
I move that we accept the approved agenda.
Thank you.
Jennifer?
I'll second that.
Okay.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye. No, I.
Very, very good. Okay. The first item on our agenda is the superintendent evaluation procedure. We have, for the last 4 or 5 years, identified leaders in each of the 3 buildings and a group of people in the district office, and have divided the school board into one-man teams to have interviews with people in each of those buildings. So we will talk to the principal at the high school, talk to the union rep at the high school, talk to maybe one of their other teachers that the superintendent will advise us. We have in the past had a list of questions that we asked. We have lost that list. So we will, unless you,
I think I have it in Google Docs.
do you?
Maybe.
Okay. Try to keep this, anyway,
Definitely.
if you have it, that would be wonderful and we could, move forward quickly on that part. The other thing we need to do is to, identify schools that you would like to go visit. I talked to Asa and his only concern was he didn't want to do the elementary school again. And I think it's a good idea,
Yeah.
to move from building to building, throughout the years. So, is there anybody who would like to do the elementary school?
I don't mind doing. I'll do whatever.
Why don't we go to preferences first? And then we'll sort out the, I don't really care. Middle school, anybody have a desire to do that?
Yeah, are you asking for somebody to go to the elementary school?
I'm asking if there is a school, is there somebody who has a preference? I'd really like to go to the middle school. To make that kind of a statement.
And if I were to go to one, I would like it to be the elementary school.
Okay. And we all agree that,
You got it.
Edie will go to the elementary school?
Now, tell me time frame when it needs to happen.
I think we hope to get it done in a month.
Or the next.
Then I better step away because this next month for me is kind of crazy.
Okay,
Yeah, with
so
my,
we'll scratch you off the elementary school list.
yeah, take me off. I would love to do it, but not this month.
Okay.
Are
Yeah.
we trying to get it done before the executive session?
I think that would be
Yeah,
the goal.
That would be the goal.
So probably, yeah, within the next 3 weeks, right? So we can,
Okay,
So
do you have a preference?
not a strong preference, I think, I'm actually sort of interested in being middle school, just because, my kiddo finished up at their last year, I have relationships. I would
Okay.
like to reconnect with some of those folks.
Jenica?
I need to find whatever. So, oh, I could do that. I guess elementary school, okay, so then I'll do that one.
Okay.
That would be good. So doing either the district. office
Let's have each to do the high school. And I'll do the district office staff.
Okay.
Now, well, what we typically do is to gather 2 or 3 people, 3 or 4 people in each building and have conversations with them, fairly informal. If Jenica could produce the old list, that would be helpful. If not, I kind of created some ideas and maybe we could create a list if we can't find an old list.
Just to be clear, you do you identify 3 or 4 people, do the meetings one-on-one or?
Yes.
Yeah,
And they take typically 15 minutes.
So I have, the one that I have though is quite comprehensive. It was what we got off of the, OSBA, and
Okay.
it has standard 1, 2, 3,
Do we know when Asa returns?
the 9 standards that we went over, which I just felt was overkill.
Yes.
Let me check.
On return.
Let me check the another place for it.
well, I think last time we had to push it because some were able to get some of the stuff collected, so.
Okay.
Okay, so that'd be while you're seeing if we've got no.
Okay.
I've jotted down 4 questions here. One of them says, tell me 3 things that Kirk does well. Next question. Can you identify things that Kirk could do better? The 3rd question, Kurt is the direct supervisor of a number of people in the district. How well does he balance oversight without being too intrusive? You know what the idea I have there, and I'm not sure that I found the right words to do it. You want a good administrator to have a balance between overseeing and not dominating his or her employees.
So am I a micromanager?
Oh, yeah.
That's,
Sure,
that's the shorthand.
Yeah.
right. So I'm not sure that I've captured that. How well does he balance oversight without being too intrusive?
Hmm.
Does that work?
I think so.
I think I have it on my computer. So I will send the list of questions
Okay.
to Amy, and then Amy can send them around. And we could put them in a Google Doc or something. so
Yep,
that
we could do that.
I'll chime in.
Saved.
The final question I have is,
Oh, I'm sorry. I
when you
didn't
have
realize-
questions for Kurt, does he respond appropriately? So these are ideas I have about how to do that.
Jeff,
Yes,
I'm not hearing everything, but are any of the questions, do they can in any way address Kurt's goals, or is that not part of this part of the evaluation?
how would we ask that kind of question?
I don't know. I mean, because I don't know if anybody else knows his goals. I mean,
That, I like, that's part one. It's quite possibly a two-part question. Do you know what Steve's goals are for the district? And is he, is the district, are they achievable?
Yeah.
Well, if they're. That doesn't get cascaded down, right? I mean, in a way.
We have
like, they're
an
not-
open session, but I mean, our goals, we don't do the entire Belong, Prepare, and Inspire playbook in the goals that we create together.
Yeah.
They're snapshots of that. They're maybe one snippet of one of the goals that's got 3 buckets, but we may choose one to make it. So I wouldn't say 100%, they would all, because what you've heard, they all report on Belong, Prepare, and Inspire.
Yeah.
I mean, so that would 100% wouldn't be an issue. Drilling down to, will they see me in buildings? Yes. Will they
Right.
know the goal is, well, I think I probably do share that. The goal is to be in as many classrooms as possible, but they don't know that we try to quantify that into a goal,
Right.
a number.
And then,
But they know it's part of the goal to be in as many as possible. So I think a lot of them might be, but again, we didn't, other than sharing the bigger buckets, we tried to say, actually said it in our mission vision planning, is
Sure.
that the integrity of the process, that when we make this document, it should match the goals in the building. It should, I mean, kind of like we structured the reports in here, that everything should be aligned. So at the end of the year, really shouldn't be a dog and pony show. Did I meet my goal leading the district? It should be shown every other month by the principals.
Yeah.
So, and the kids who present, the stakeholder partners, et cetera. So. But I think, I mean, again, we've done, I think when I got here initially, it was a narrative. Very loosely, one
Yep.
page, here it is, and it was a little bit looser than this, as far as the number of folks interviewed.
Yep.
A couple of years, we did a massive 360, which I think the board felt was too much work, because it wasn't, I don't think the results were much different. And then we went kind of found a middle ground. This has kind of been tweaked a little bit, but with this process.
Yeah.
So I think however, I think whatever questions you guys feel need, to be answered as far as
Okay.
that and what is important from your perspective of leadership. I mean, as we were talking, right, one of your guys' things is my evaluation, right? And so, I think we've got goals that line up. I don't think, I'd actually be interested if you ask those questions, if they would connect the mission vision to my goals. Because we call them the mission vision, we don't call them my goals,
Right.
the district goals.
yeah,
So, that would be an interesting question to hear the feedback.
well, I will, yeah, I'll follow in what I have, and I can also include the ones from the OSBA, maybe we can, because I think some of them were good, I think some of them were just,
Right.
there's just too many, and there's so much overlap. But I think there were some that were useful,
Okay.
but yeah, maybe we can add yours.
And then at the end of this process, with each person, we asked them to essentially grade Kurt on a scale of 1 to 4, from excellent to terrible. On leadership, communication, culture, and ethics. So in the course of your interview with each of the people you talk to, at the end of it, you say, will you give Kurt a grade on a scale of 1 to 4, 1 being best, 4 being worst, on these 4 pillars of Kurt's performance.
So we're going for golf scores, got it.
There we go. And that I think gives us some data, and it is manageable and focuses on probably the most important aspects of Kurt's work. Questions?
Nope.
Process makes sense to me. I think it's perfectly fine. I'll be really curious to see what the question is from the OSBA.
Well, OSBA has a catalog of,
Well, I'm sure it's a book.
a book.
They-
Well, even it was like the pillars or whatever it was like 9 and it was still.
Yeah.
So I think that's where we probably pulled these 4 from this, but, yeah, I'll check on but we can set up like a doc too that then we can fill in
Okay,
and submit, because I guess it's an ASIC collect those then. We'll send them all.
we'll send our results to ASA and
Yeah,
then
okay.
we will have a conversation
Okay.
about Kurt and then a conversation with Kurt. And we will move forward.
So when's the? March
That is the executive session.
5th is the next one?
Yeah, which
So I think
will be
if
a
we
little tricky. I will not be here in person. I will be having to teleport in from overseas.
Oh, okay.
So,
Okay,
Like, when do you leave? Will you be able to send those over to?
yeah, I
like
leave
the
April 3rd.
25th?
April 3rd, March 3rd. I leave March 3rd.
Oh, okay.
okay.
Oh, you'll just be
Yeah,
getting.
and
you'll still
and
get
honestly,
deadlines,
also
but-
too, just in case you share your feelings and thoughts
Yeah.
with, maybe not
I
2
can-
board members, you don't inform, but with
I can-
somebody.
I can do days.
Yeah. And so just in case there's a technical issue or something, at least your feedback is.
Yeah, that was my one thing, my one concern. I'm optimistic.
Okay.
But I'll be able to connect.
Okay. You're not in the fall.
I'm close.
Right,
I'll be in Thailand.
okay,
Jeff,
yes,
would you or maybe Amy, I don't, somebody send me kind of a synopsis of the ideas for the questions, just so I could pick them up well enough. I couldn't hear all the details.
So I'll do a quick synopsis of what we talked about here, and then I believe Jennifer is going to set up a document as well.
Okay, thank you.
okay,
Yes.
let's move forward to district property asset planning.
So, Jen asked a great question about leasing rates. And kind of evaluation of what to do with post around what's the future of the leasing practice if Park and Rec is moving into the facility, the old elementary school, actually. We're now should from henceforth refer to it as the community center.
Right.
So they're moving in the community center, after spring break or over spring break. The question with the Coalfield Center being open and the potential of us moving in there having all services on one campus. It doesn't make a lot of sense to have this building sit empty.
Yep.
And so, we've talked about whether do we look at lease options, do we look at selling? And leasing, there's a variety of lease rates, anywhere from $1.50 to $2.25. Typically is what spaces in sisters are going for, depending on the nature of them, their age, whatever the size.
And we are at the moment constrained with the kind of people that we can lease it to.
That's the biggest impact.
That's a big.
We could lease it, but under zone public, you really have almost no ability to truly, again, talking to one of the people I spoke to, they said basically your lease should be, you should generate 5 times whatever you're leasing something for revenue to be able to, in your business model, to make that pay off. And that would be difficult for a lot of folks with this facility if it wasn't for the things that we're talking to about, right? Like, could it be, I know the people for the Sisters Museum, could it be a museum? It could be, but what are they gonna charge people to get in? I mean, to lease it and then even cover a lease versus what we could do with just selling it and put the capital into an account and sitting on it.
Right.
Until we, if we need to build or if we need to do something else, having that money for some kind of capital improvement. So that's the real discussion. And again, I shared the story about Boxer or Box something, that was the company that does the manufacturing that was looking at. But immediately upon conversation, like, sorry, you can't use it for that. Well, and we're meeting with Treehouse because even the mental health support, which for the 18-year-old, which is a community service, is a issue. They're a nonprofit, but that's an issue with the code and needing to look at maybe getting a variance or temporary while they can do the code. So we're trying to problem solve because everyone agrees that mental health support and sisters would be great, and that would be a great place for it to be, but we also got to follow the protocol. So, so really this property wouldn't, without a change in its zoning, wouldn't be really usable.
Well, it sounds like either way, whether we lease it or sell it, we're gonna have to change the zoning.
Yeah.
Because.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think we talked about the fact that if we sell it, it's better to have the zoning. I mean, this is a problem in sisters in general, just because the zoning, the whole, you know, the urban growth boundary is only so big,
Yeah.
and then it's like micro divided into little zoning, tiny little pockets, and so anytime you're trying to find
Yeah.
any space, it's like, it's always trying, like there's just so finite.
And in the process, another recommendation when looking at this property particularly was then considering, do you want to do a lot line adjustment and actually make this in, because you have the open field could be considered a lot.
Right.
So you could actually make it into, again, I think it would be. Some would recommend that you go through the work, and the question is, we would have to pick the zoning option that we think would be most, or do we wait and look at someone who's interested zoning it to what they want or making that request, right? So that,
Yeah.
those would be some of the details as we get into this, if the board decides. And what I would like is to ask the board in the March meeting to give me some direction on moving forward with this building. So that we can, we're entering the time where it's the time to.
Yeah.
To look at those opportunities. If we wait too much longer, we'll be behind in that process and wouldn't want to sit on the asset if we can make it work for us. And by make it work for us, really mean make the money work for us, right?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. I think personally, I'm not interested in being a landlord. And especially a landlord when there's no foreseeable users out there.
Yeah, that's the challenge, you know, we may be landlord at some point, but it may be more on workforce housing than anything. Right, because we do own property, we may be able to do something that way, which that was another part of one of the meetings I had today was, what does that look like as for us in the future? You know, again, we've talked about, somebody splitting off some property from, we lease the park and rec, because they don't lease that whole property, we have 1.75 acres that is ours on the far side. And looking at that potential, again, have to be rezoned, but would that be something to support workforce housing? You know, would it be tiny homes? Would it be, you know, like the Northwest Housing Alternatives makes more like apartment complexes. But they have to own the property. If we owned it, would we want to do that? Or what would the city allow zoning for? We did that study with University of Oregon. So there's some conversation about, would you do smaller units with a common space with some stuff, a little bit like, what is the little cottages over here that are for rent, right? So they have a common space and then little outbuildings as well. So there's a lot of ideas about what we could do to help support workforce housing and or just affordable housing in sisters. If that's the direction we want to go. The first question is this one, we started with this one, and then we gauge what's going on with Park and Rec. You know, look at, do we want to split off some property? If we think we're not going to revisit that property, it would make sense to look at some other options for some of those pieces. We're still not a lot of movement, quite frankly, because the attorney I was working with left the ESD. I think they're with Ben Lapine now, but we're still on the table with looking at a quick claim on the Cloverdale property to if that 2 acres be free and clear, because there's a lien, or not lien, there's a rider on the title that it can only be used for educational purposes, where they can't sell it. So, and if we got that clear, I would recommend that would be a property that we should also look to liquidate, because it really doesn't serve a purpose for us. Right now, Heart of Oregon is using it, but once they relocate and they finish their capital campaign and relocate into Redmond, it sat empty before Heart of Oregon went in there, and it would go back to sitting empty. So, that's kind of the perspective. The other things, I guess, probably with Eric is, we do own 2 pretty massive tracts of land. One is Trout Creek Conservatory, which is right behind the high school, so that area, and it's got conservancy language about what can and can't happen in there. Additionally, we also own another 160 acres out Stevens Canyon that was donated to us 4 years ago, called Wild Haven. And again, we have a development plan out there. Most of it's in conservancy, but we have basically the idea and a plan to develop into kind of a quasi outdoor school. Well, not just environmental study, but you can do leadership stuff. You can do all kinds of fun activities with kids out there. Some of the things are things you won't see anywhere else. There's an old growth juniper stand. There's a good view from up on the upper end of the property where the stone house is. Right? They talked about making the stone house into like a natural history museum. So there's some really cool aspects of how we could develop that property once we are able. So, and then obviously the other campus at the other end. So, any other questions? Did I answer the questions we had about kind of this place and other properties?
I think, go ahead.
I apologize. My hearing sometimes doesn't pick up all the details of what you all are saying. Has there been any discussion about taking the building that you are all in and somehow making it into some workforce housing for staff?
We've had some conversation about the ability to, the transportation building is a metal frame building, and the ability to look at a raised floor on the plumbing and do something in that model to maybe look at it, if it would pencil out. The question would be, would you be better off just moving that and starting over? This, I think, and where it is in, I think it would still be more valuable, in my opinion, to, for the price, right? The estimate, I think I should pass it on the board, somewhere between 2.5 and $3 million for this property. We could make a bunch of tiny homes with on existing property.
Yeah.
If we chose to use that money for that. Again, my recommendation would put it in the capital fund until we know some of the other things that we know. Is Park and Rec going to be in a community center permanently? Would there be a chance for us to be permanently in the Coalfield Center? Then that means we wouldn't have to build an administrative building.
Right.
If we did have to build an administrative building, keeping that money in a capital fund so it's available to do that would make sense. So I think there's still some things to be decided, but I'm not sure even that would pencil out with this facility for what you could do starting from scratch. And a little bit, I would also like to involve our construction class, because I think if we could get, you know, as a class project and we can learn from some of the construction, that would be a good thing as well. So. But good question, Edie.
Thank you.
Okay. Cell phones.
So, again, for those that are getting the emails on the listserv, right, there was an email that, questioned Lake Oswego, I think, did an all-district ban, of cell phones. What, you know, I poked around a little bit. I don't see phones out per se in our class when there's instructional time happening as far as being instruction. I know they're not out at all at the elementary school.
Not in the middle school either.
Yeah, they already have those plans at the high school. There's a calculator sleeve that they put the phones in when they walk in the door.
Yeah.
and if they need them as a tool, so we've avoided doing the thou shalt across the board, because it seems like right when you do that, then there's an issue that then you're violating your own policy because you made a thou shalt when there's an exception.
Yeah.
So I agree, all the research in there is research we know, right? I don't know that, if we banned cell phones, I guess I'm not sure that kids walking between classes checking their phones, I'm not sure we're winning those fights. Even if we ban them with parents
Yeah.
who are, and kids who will just say, well, I need to get a hold of my parents and I'm gonna have a phone on me and I can check it in between class. I'm not disrupting class. Why is that a
And
problem?
now it's just like one more fight.
Yeah.
Like-
Do we want to be invested in policing that? Because
Right,
that's what,
yeah.
that's what we then are requiring ourselves in. That's a
Yeah.
lot of work for a very good thing.
Yeah, so, I mean, our stance has been where it was, not to make a policy that necessarily manages everything and gives our, I mean, we believe we're doing what should be done. You know, I think, additionally, if there are concerns about, you know, people thinking that kids are just, you know, abundantly viewing YouTube during class time, or whatever it is that they're doing. I mean, having a bud and listening to music while you're doing work is not necessarily, sometimes my experience is that's usually been allowed by most teachers. Instead of them playing music, they're like, if you have a bud and you want to listen to something, go ahead, and this is work time, you know, and as long as they're being productive, there's no issue. So again, it goes back to being a distraction, which I think is what, and when I was in the classroom, they were a tool, right? You could still, yeah, so, and we have Chromebooks, but they're also still a tool. You can put, well, this, I used to carry one of those, but now my whole thing is in this or on my computer, my whole calendar is on there, right? So I get the notifications on my watch, I get everything. So kids who use it that way, when an assignment is due on a certain day or project, there's still the ability to put it in. I don't know that we're helping, maybe creating more of a problem than we are creating a solution.
I asked like a bunch of high schoolers that were just like randomly like, hey, can you guys have cell phones in class? And just kept it really benign of like, what's the policy and stuff? And they're like, well, it kind of depends on the teacher, but for the most part, we put our phones in the, you know, slots or whatever. And it's like, it's a distraction. And they're like, well, that's just classroom management, you know? And they're like, if a teacher can't control a classroom, then we have bigger problems, right?
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that's a good point.
And
And yeah.
as we discussed the other day too, we have acceptable use policies already that kids
Yeah.
are they sign at the beginning of the year to say, I will use technology in these ways.
Yeah.
So I think it feels very heavy-handed to come in at this point. And I'm not seeing any gross harm at this juncture.
I think if we're starting to get complaints from the teachers, then that's
Right.
more of a concern, but if it's not to
Yeah.
not include the parent comments, but
Totally.
like,
And not a complaint, I've had a couple teachers who have said, hey, we should. I'm like, well, is it a problem in your class? Well, no.
it's
So
like,
it's-
let's not project.
Yes,
like-
it is interesting
Yeah.
even that, because I have the luxury of getting into pretty much all the classrooms around the district.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, well, where is it a problem, right? And it's funny, it's more the idea, but again, I'm not sure it's solving a problem versus creating one.
Yeah.
So we'll leave that discussion at that, and if there is something, there are some model policies that go from very light to very absolute. If board discussion comes at any point, if the board would like me to, bring a draft forward that's even in the lighter mode, I'm happy to do that, but I'll just wait for direction from the board. If again, we get more, feedback from our community that seems to want to push in that direction.
Okay.
Oops. Okay. There we go.
Next item on the agenda is adjournment. We will adjourn at 7:02.
Well,
Okay.
So, Jeff, Jeff.
Mr. Chairman.
Bye, guys.
Steve. Bye.
Thanks, Steve.
Hey, I did have
Cards
Oh.
from.
comment as a
Steve,
budget committee member. A comment as a budget committee member, the properties and all that discussion you're having will have a lot of budget impact, obviously. And so you may want to engage some of your members on the budget committee and ad hoc committees or otherwise to look into and offer opinions. So that's just a thought. And my last comment about that is this particular building is the district office building of your properties, does have quite a community history. You're located now right next to City Hall and the library. And I'm sure that the public is going to want to have an opportunity for listening sessions, provide input, or even hearing level when you get ready to make a decision. So I'm just encouraging us all to really think about the community opportunity to give you thoughts. So anyway, those are my two little quick things I wanted to say. And I sure enjoyed missing the snowstorm.
I would, so from the budget idea, really what needs to happen is Sherry just needs to put it on the other revenue line to account for any expenditures that happen with the funds, right? If it's not planned for in the budget, then you don't have an opportunity to do anything with that money. Right, so special revenue funds are typically the end of it, and so those are all projections. She always typically over projects as well, because if we got more money from something that we didn't realize, then we don't put it in the budget. So
Okay.
that's a part of that process. That would be a conversation with Sherry and an estimate on what the value would be. And maybe that we're not even thinking about expending those funds next year, which really becomes a topic for the following year.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I think we can all find our way home. And,
Yep. Drive safely.
Drive safe.